Oh yeah, we're gonna break them all down. So
Groovy.
let's break them down in the order of which he laid them out. The first thing that he did was say that the illustrations were fictitious, that the assumptions that were being used were inaccurate, and so I thought we should address that one first.
Sure.
So let me just show you what I'm going through, and then
Sure.
I want to.
Your show, have at it.
All right. So the first thing that we did was just run a sample male age 45, and we just put a $50,000 contribution in for 5 years. We did a comparison between what that policy looks like without financing and what it looks like with financing. I think one of the most important things people need to remember is that we're not talking about whether the policy can generate rates of return. The policies are going to get whatever the policies get. What Kai-Zen does is add more money. And so the policy assumptions are all identical, just the only additional thing that we did was add the financing to it, and then we ran the current assumptions, that the carrier compliant current assumptions, and then we did a couple of other things. Once we ran those current assumptions, we also do...
Hang on, Grace, before you go into the more stuff, let's break apart.
The current assumptions?
And let's just break apart in plain English some of the things you said there. So a lot of his questioning was the kind of questions you would ask a security advisor who's allowed to do things that we're not allowed to do. So in terms of the assumptions, let's be very clear. This is a regulated space with a prescribed way of projecting values. So when we talk about illustrated rate, we're not even allowed to use the rates that these policies have actually done. So what the regulator does is they kind of took data and they deliberately dialed it down. So the illustrated rate is actually 20% or more below the historical average return of these products. So A, it's regulated, and B, it's conservatively regulated. So it's not like this pie in the sky that he's accusing the agent in this case, and by extension us, and presumably anybody else doing a life insurance illustration.
Oh, I'm looking for that current rate. What is the current rate?
5.53, just give or take. Actually, it's 5.63, my mistake. The loan rate we used is the forward curve that the banks are using for interest rate forecasts that every bank uses, plus the bank pricing spread. So the loan rate is exactly what the banks are telling us is the rate they're using today and their projections of what they think it's going to look like over the next 15 years. The reason that's important is, interest rates are the prelude of the banks and clever economists. So we don't try and pretend we're interest rate gurus. What we're taking is the information from the gurus.
Well, and I also think it's important that we make people or not make people, but try to help people understand that, again, rates have changed over the last 22 years that we've been doing this on both the bank side and the product side. And we're not interested in the year-to-year specific rates. What we're interested in is over a long period of time, what that spread is between those policy credit rates and the loan rates, and can we outperform those loan rates with the policy?
All right, so I interrupted you, and you were about to go into, I assume, stress testing and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I was going to point out that on the illustrations that the clients receive, we're using the regulated, we'll
call it the normal as of today.
Correct.
Right.
But in addition to that, on every single client illustration that we run 2 sets of stress tests, which are located on the illustration page. And on those stress tests, the 2 things that affect the spread between these 2 products is the high interest of the 80s, which is the highest loan rate time period that we can find historically. And we run that against the self-funded without the leveraging policy. And then we run a Great Depression, and same thing, we run that. So why don't you give us some more information about what are behind the numbers of the high interest rate stress test? Sure.
So essentially what clients are trying to understand is I am buying Kai-Zen, most clients, I'm buying Kai-Zen, whoever that is, I'm buying Kai-Zen as a supplement for my retirement income, something like that, right? So will it really be that? So the first thing is we're projecting the normal kind of going rate of today. The 1980s is the highest interest rate period in US modern history. But we do more than that. So what we basically say, you know how everybody's freaking out about the Fed raising the rate 50 basis points.
75 today.
Today, 75, right?
Yeah.
Big drama, major meltdown, stock market's down 20% this year because of fears of inflation, blah, blah, blah. We go to 18.1% overnight. So I'm going to say that's
on our stress test.
On our stress test, right? I'm going to say that's a little bit of a shock. The other thing is the IUL product itself is linked to bonds, which in turn are linked to interest rates. So if interest rates go up, bond yields go up. Typically speaking, this is a simplification, but IUL and performance goes up. So we say, okay, by the way, that's just real world economics. And that's like saying the sun comes up, it gets warm. Here's the thing. We then say the product does not get any better for 4 years and gets marginally better, even though we know corporate bond rates in the 80s, 1981, were around 16%, not the 4.5% we're using today. So it is draconian even for a 1980s test. And that, by the way, has been checked by the banks, the benefit brokers, and the carriers themselves independently to confirm that number. So,
and we also post that under our stress testing on the ILIA site.
The Great Depression, the way the IUL works is it tracks a market, but it's not in the market. So it can get the upside, but it can't get the downside. So when we have a correction like we've had this year of 20%, for an IUL, that's just a zero return. So what do we do in the Great Depression? We know in the Great Depression, stock portfolios lost 90% of their value near as damn it. But what that means in IUL terms is you get a bunch of 0 years. So we actually run 9 of the first 12 years at 0, which is actually harder than the Great Depression. Again, this has been verified and checked by third parties. So what we're running here is we're saying, look, we've got a kind of, I'll call it expected outcome. And the two worst economic conditions that have actually happened in the real world. So I think he's being marginally unfair when he's saying pie in the sky. The only pie in the sky this is pie in the sky bad that we're showing, not pie in the sky good.
Well, and two, we don't, if they don't meet these stress tests, then we won't allow them into the Kai-Zen plan anyway.
Correct.
So they've got
from
to
a product point of view, that's correct. Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So that's all located inside of ILIA. Every client has access to that, as well as the illustrations that we ran with the ledgers, I guess, which are very complicated for clients to understand. And so we try to put it in an easier format. We provide them also all the potential risk, reward, et cetera.
So what you're saying is this guy obviously didn't see the ledger, or he saw part of it. Because if he'd actually looked at all of it, the ledgers are the compliance stuff that's, CPAs and people like myself love because it's loads and loads of numbers. We distill the information down for most clients, because most clients basically say something like this: cut to the chase here. What's the real decision that I'm going to make my decision on, or what's the real information I'm going to make my decision on? I'm not going to go through pages and pages of spreadsheets.
Well,
but they're there, right?
Right, they're all there. They're provided, as well as the 30-page insurance company illustration.
Yes, the translation from hieroglyphic Greek or
Correct.
Egyptian or whatever, right?
But it's all available for the client who wants to go through it, soup to nuts, so to speak.